robbery, kidnapping, aggravated battery, burglary, intimidation, aggravated driving under the influence, fleeing and eluding drug offenses, and threatening a public official. No bail. What?
Oh, Joe Rogan.
Well, they're essentially eliminating cash bail for almost everything dangerous. It's crazy. I mean, everyone's freaking out.
Again, that was Joe Rogan from his popular podcast that has nearly 11 million listeners, and that's nearly the size of the state of Illinois, talking about the SAFE-T Act. It's a controversial bill that passed in early January of 2021, takes effect January 1st of 2023, includes a whole bunch of things, including the elimination of cash bail for a whole host of crimes. Good morning, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. You can always find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or elsewhere. Just search Bishop on Air, and we can connect that way. Of course, you can call in live and local at 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here for Springfield's Morning News. So get your phone calls in if you want to chime in about the SAFE-T Act, and in particular, a Democrat at the State House who's filed a bill to amend the SAFE-T Act. We're going to go through some of that right now and some of the opposition to the idea. And it's not necessarily Republicans coming out and opposing changes to the SAFE-T Act. Republicans have been pushing for changes to the SAFE-T Act since it was debated briefly back in January of 2021. And since then, Republicans, including even some Democrat state's attorneys from across the state, pushing to have some kind of amendment to allow for a much more better understanding and clarifications on how they're going to implement the SAFE-T Act, because ultimately what it does, it gets rid of cash bail for defendants who are facing criminal charges. So when you get arrested, I've never been arrested, knock on wood. I don't plan on ever getting arrested. But if you get arrested, and maybe some of you have been arrested, you get processed at county jail, fingerprinted, photoed, and then you go see a judge, and the judge says, okay, well, you can either post bail or you're going to stay in jail until you get the trial if you plead not guilty. So ultimately what the SAFE-T Act does is it says for a list of crimes, that individual who's charged, not found guilty, that individual who's charged with a crime can't be held behind the bars of a jail pending the next set of hearings for that criminal case. Again, innocent until proven guilty. And that seems to be really what's at the heart of those who support the SAFE-T Act. But the concerns are that you could have violent criminals who are arrested for crimes being let out of jail and told, okay, well, your court date's this date. Hopefully you show up. And then you've got that person out on the streets causing more problems, possibly. So that's the chief concern here, is that you've got law enforcement who don't like the idea of the prospect of potentially violent criminals out back on the streets, even after police go out and pick them up for alleged crimes. So this, of course, has come to a head, as you heard Joe Rogan talking about it on his podcast, saying that it's crazy.
Well, they're essentially eliminating cash bail for almost everything dangerous. It's crazy. I mean, everyone's freaking out.
So now the pressure has built so much, including lawsuits from some state's attorneys. You've got a Democrat at the State House, and the Democrats typically have supported this. Not all of them, but Democrats have typically supported this, along with the Black Caucus. You've got State Senator Scott Bennett, who's filed a Senate bill to bring about some changes. So Scott Bennett, he filed Senate Bill 4228. And he says in a statement on his website, as a former prosecutor, I understand the importance of presumptive innocence and individuals before proven guilty, supporting police and keeping violent criminals out of our neighborhoods. He said Senate Bill 4228 is an effort to improve consistency in the SAFE-T Act and allow law enforcement officials to continue effectively performing their duties to protect communities. So he says that the intent of the law aims to do away with cash bail in an effort to end systemic racism in the criminal justice system. Senate Bill 4228 updates many provisions in the SAFE-T Act by clarifying language to address concerns raised by local law enforcement. So he hopes to get this brought up during the veto session, but that is going to be after the November 8th election. And there's some indication that after the November 8th election, we could have a good understanding of where we're at politically in the state of Illinois, let alone the rest of the country. Now, I'm sure people don't make any illusions whatsoever. Democrats control the Illinois State House, and even after the November election, in the following week of November, Democrats will still control the State House. And even in the early part of January, Democrats still control the State House, and it's expected in the new General Assembly that's seated and sworn in after mid-January, it's expected Democrats are still going to control the State House, but by how much? I think that's really the question that we'll wait and see what happens after the November 8th election. So Scott Bennett, he files this bill. It's, again, Senate Bill 4228, and it's already got some opposition to it. All right, so this group called the Pretrial Justice Network, all right, the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice, they issued a statement that was not too fair or not too kind of Scott Bennett's bill. So again, this is a group that supports the Safety Act, and they say that Bennett's bill violates people's rights and further harms caused by mass incarceration. They say that Senate Bill 4228 violates individuals' rights. It creates a presumption of detention for people charged with crimes that would require them to serve life in prison if convicted. The Illinois Constitution requires that the state have the burden to prove that an individual should be detained. The individual cannot be given a burden to prove that they deserve release. And they list a whole bunch of other things as well. They say that it furthers mass incarceration. They have a website, endmoneybond.org, that they point people to if they want more information. But obviously, this is an indication that it's not going to be easy to pass a trailer bill at the state legislature, because there's going to be groups like the Illinois Network of Pretrial Justice that are going to be pushing against any changes to the Safety Act, while you've got pending lawsuits against the Safety Act and serious concerns from individuals on what the implementation of the Safety Act is going to look like. One of those individuals is, of course, State Senator Darren Bailey. He has been taking to Facebook and very critical of the Safety Act and crime in Illinois in general. Here's some of what he had to say recently, taking to social media to address his concerns about the Safety Act.
Pritzker has created the crime that exists in Chicago and on our streets. Just take a look at the date, January 2021, and you'll see that since then, that crime has elevated in Chicago. And friends, on January 1st, what we're reading about, it is going to open up all over the state.
And Bailey also went on to say that he believes the state needs new leadership, and that's why he's running for governor as a Republican.
So why aren't they calling Pritzker to account? Why aren't they calling Lori Lightfoot to account? Why aren't they asking why Kim Foxx isn't prosecuting? This is devastating and ravaging our country and the city of Chicago.
So what happens here? We've got a trailer bill from a Democrat. The legislature isn't scheduled back in session until after the November 8th election, the week after. Why not just come back and deal with this before the election? That's something that some have asked, and in particular at the State House. I talked to one representative who said there's nothing that is keeping lawmakers from being called back to deal with this issue. And this seems to be a major issue that has elevated considerably in the political discussion heading into the November election. So I talked with one state rep who said, let's have the lawmakers called back and deal with this. That way, any changes that are necessary are on the record before the election, instead of waiting until after the election, so that there's no direct political consequences. So we'll be watching the space closely. And of course, I'd love to hear your reaction. You can always call in live and local at 217-629-7970. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com or find me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Just search out Bishop on Air and we can connect that way.